The distinguished gentleman in this portrait is Dongseom, an official of the Korean government in the late 18th century. The portrait is today in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Dongseom was born, according to the most commonly given dates, in 1710 and died in 1795. He lived in the Joseon era, which began with the overthrow of the preceding Goryeo dynasty in 1392 and lasted for over 5 centuries until the Japanese annexation of Korea in 1910. Under Joseon, Buddhism, which had been predominant in Korea under Goryeo, was supplanted as the state religion by Neo-Confucianism, which developed in China from the 9th century onwards and which sought to revive traditional Confucianism. Neo-Confucianism had great and lasting influence not only in China but across East Asia, in Indochina, Japan, and not least in Korea. Under Joseon, Korean society was shaped according to Neo-Confucian values, through the cultivation of correct social relations, the practice of ethical reflection, and the performance of proper and beneficial ritual actions. It was the task of the state to cultivate virtue and morality in society. As part of this, the state bureaucracy was entrusted to the Yangban, an order of officialdom divided into 2 branches, military and civil. Civil administration was the more prestigious, and was carried out by an elite of scholar officials, appointed through competitive examination. They were deeply versed in Confucianism and well practiced in the skills needed for the exercise of public office. In the historical literature, they are often called literati because of the literary accomplishments and the mastery of calligraphy which were required of them. Dongseom was a member of this elite class. He was a highly skilled calligrapher, involved in the composition and production of documents for the Joseon court. The Yangban class was exclusive, hierarchical, and possessed great authority, and portraits of individual members of the class reflect these characteristics. Portrait painting was a very important and highly developed art in Korea. The painting of portraits of meritorious servants of the state had begun early in the Joseon era, with painters employed by the state creating formal images for display in official portrait halls. This practice was later abandoned because the instability of Joseon court politics meant that someone honored as loyal and meritorious today might be condemned as an enemy of the state tomorrow. Instead, the display of portraits was essentially privatized. They were presented to the individuals depicted, to their families, or to the Confucian academies with which they were associated. In Confucianism, such portraits had particular roles to play, as funerary images and in the rites performed in ancestral shrines. It was important for portraits used in this context to represent not only the external appearance of a person as accurately and honestly as possible, and to show the roles they had played in life, but to capture their character and their internal essence, to locate and reveal the soul of the sitter. Such a portrait would become a focus of ritual, of reverence, and of commemoration. In the 18th century, Korean portrait painting reached new heights of accomplishment, precision, and psychological insight. The portrait of Dongseom is an important surviving example from this period. The portrait was painted either very late in Dongseom's life, after 1790, which is when he received promotion to the official rank which is indicated by the insignia he wears, or as a posthumous portrait, within a few years of his death. As was usual for portraits of this type, the work is unsigned, and the identity of the artist, who would have been a state employee, is unknown. We do know, from comparisons with other portraits, that Dongseom is the sitter. The portrait is painted in ink and watercolor on silk. The unmounted portrait, without rollers and hanging cord, is 133 centimeters in height, and 77.2 centimeters in width, about 4 feet tall and 2 feet 6 inches wide, a typical size for such portraits, which were traditionally fairly large. As was usual with such portraits, the composition is highly formalized and flattened, giving an impression of shallowness which thrusts the figure of the sitter into greater prominence. He is slightly in three-quarter view and looking to the side instead of directly at the viewer, a style which became increasingly popular in Korea during the 18th century, replacing the former Chinese-influenced full-face posture. The setting is austere, again so that the focus is on the figure. The floor is covered with simple matting, and the background is plain. Dongseom sits very upright, with hands resting on his knees, but concealed within his sleeves. His posture conveys authority, but also reflective repose. His gaze suggests self-containment and calm detachment. The necessity for depicting the sitter with the greatest possible accuracy, so that the whole person could be said to be present in the portrait, produced a highly detailed and precise approach on the part of the painter, which is exemplified in this portrait. Very fine brushstrokes have been used to depict the hairs of the sitter's beard, the wrinkles of his face, the fine embroidery of the rank badge, the claws on the leopard skin, the decoration on the footstool, and the fibers of the matting on the floor. Everything is delineated with equal care. There is no hierarchy of detail. There is great individuality in the sitter's face, but also realism, with flaws and the signs of age carefully and clearly shown, and realism, too, in the depiction of the edges of the footstool, where the decoration is wearing away. The clothing is shown in great detail. It tells us about Dongseom's status as an important office holder. He is wearing the formal court dress, gwanbok, reserved for senior officials, a black official hat, samo, with projecting wings, a black silk robe with a round collar, daliong, embellished with a rank badge, hyungbae, and a belt, gakdae, in this case made of rhinoceros horn, in a style appropriate to his rank. The robe is woven with an exquisite design of clouds. The inside, as can be seen at the hem, is blue. The dark background of the robe allows the rank badge, brilliant with typically Korean coloring, to stand out prominently. This badge shows the sitter's position in the second rank of the 9-rank bureaucratic hierarchy. It has a design of 2 cranes, which indicates that he is a senior official of the civil administration. Officials in ranks 1 to 3 wore badges with 2 cranes. Lower-ranking officials wore badges with 1 crane. The crane was regarded as a symbol of longevity and good fortune in Korea, and the cranes in the rank badge are displayed in a setting composed of other auspicious symbols, clouds, waves, plants, and rock formations. As mentioned earlier, there is another portrait of Dongseom, which shows a different side of his character and represents a different style of Korean late Joseon portraiture. This portrait is less austere and more intimate. It shows him as the scholar rather than the official, and as a private rather than a public man. It is undated, but was probably painted in the 1770s. In this depiction, Dongseom wears a scholar's robe, with the kind of headdress typically associated with it, a black fabric hood. As an official, his upright posture, seated in a chair with his feet raised on a footstool, conveyed authority. Here he sits as a scholar, cross-legged on the floor. He has a low and simple wooden table in front of him, on which various articles are placed. On the left is an antique bronze incense burner. Laid out beside it are a book, an inkstone, and a brush pot containing brushes, representing the essential equipment of a scholar, and thus symbolizing the scholarly life. These are also personally significant objects, as they were brought back from China, along with many other things, by Yun Dongseom after he had travelled there on a diplomatic mission in 1771. Confucianism tended to be negative towards too much preoccupation with material things, but during the 18th century a number of prominent Korean scholars and scholar officials began to pursue the collection and connoisseurship of precious objects, antiques, and objects of art. The development of Chekguri painting, depicting assemblages of precious and valued objects and possessions, represents the same type of preoccupation. Chinese theories of art appreciation, which were beginning to circulate in Korea at this time, were cited in support of these activities. The cultivation of understanding of such objects and appreciation of them was seen as positive. Yun Dongseom collected, studied, and appreciated art objects, antiques, calligraphy, and similar precious things, and was known for spending large sums of money on them. He was a prominent participant in the growing collector-antiquarian movement among contemporary Korean literati, and this painting can be seen as both a celebration of these activities and a response to Confucian critics of them. It presents them as consistent with the image of the reclusive, contemplative, and dignified Confucian scholar.